Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2006 biopic drama titled The Queen. Now, The Queen runs for 1 hour and 43 minutes long. It is directed by Stephen Frears. The script was written by Peter Morgan. It is produced by Andy Harries, Christine Langan, and Tracy Seward. It is composed by Alexandre Desplat, the cinematography by Alfonso Biedo, and it was edited by Lucia Zicchetti. And the stars of the movie are Helen Mirren, who went on to win a Best Actress Oscar at the Oscars. Let's see, also joining the cast is Michael Sheen, James Cromwell, Helen McCrory, Alex Jennings, Roger Allam, Sylvia Syms, Tim McMullan, Mark Bazeley, and Michel Gay. Though the name of the title sparked anything that would be considered riveting, after all, this is a movie where Helen Mirren is portraying Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen could have easily focused on Her Majesty in any direction in her life, from the time she was coordinated as Queen in 1952 to any other event that was very pivotal and important in her life. And mind you, there are many chapters in her life, especially that she has been the head of the monarchy in Great Britain since 1952, after the death of her father, King George VI. But no, this is not a biopic of Queen Elizabeth II. But we are looking at an important moment in her life, and maybe even in particular, the entire royal family. So instead of just looking at all the details of her incredible journey as being the monarch of Great Britain in almost 7 decades. Let that sink in, folks. 7 decades. Next year, if she's still around, she would have been queen for 70 years. That's quite a milestone. I don't know if she'll make history by being the longest reigning monarch in Great Britain, but she is pretty damn close now, is she? No, instead we focus on her life in the late summer of 1997, at a time when the world was in mourning. Yes, on August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana was killed in a horrific accident as she was escaping the paparazzi through a dark tunnel in Paris. 3 other people also lost their lives too. Well, there was Princess Diana. There was her boyfriend at the time, Dodi Fayed, and their limousine rider, Henri Paul. The only one who survived was their personal trainer or personal bodyguard, Trevor Rees Jones. He was the only one who survived. But everybody else died. But of course, the focus is not going to be on Dodi. It's definitely not going to be on Henri Paul. No. This death was all about Princess Diana. Now, although her death is something of a tragedy, this is a pretty sensitive and a pretty sad subject to really fully talk about, because of the fact that her death really did shock the world. I mean, Her news of her death could be just enough to stop traffic anywhere in the world. And it wasn't just Great Britain that was in mourning. Pretty much the world was in mourning. So there was this debate that was actually going around wondering if Princess Diana should have a small, private, low-key funeral with only just, news coverage and just, having a small little send-off in her mourning. Or should she just go out with a big, grandeur send-off? Now, Queen Elizabeth II felt that Princess Diana should get a private funeral. After all, she did divorce Prince Charles, and when she divorced Prince Charles, she was no longer Princess Diana in the books. No. She is now just a commoner. She's not a princess anymore. She's now just Diana Spencer. She wanted out. If she would have just stayed married to Prince Charles, maybe she should have gotten a big funeral, a big send-off. But she wanted to emancipate herself from the monarchy. So Queen Elizabeth II thought, I don't see what's the big deal. She wanted out of the monarchy. Let's just give her a small little funeral, a big send-off, But nothing as high prolific. But because she was looked up to in the world as a whole, as an icon, as a lovable individual, a person that everyone gravitated to through her good times and her bad, everyone looked up to her and almost worshipped her like she was in the status of goddess. She was the people's princess. When she married Prince Charles, it wasn't even about the royal family. It was all about Princess Diana. And when she died, it sent shockwaves around the world. But because she was looked up to and had the adulation and the admiration from people all over the world, those believed that she should get a big grandeur funeral. So the movie The Queen deals with the tragic death of Princess Diana and her response or lack of response during these troubled times. Now, of course, we all know that because of Princess Diana's death, the monarchy was kind of in trouble. Because their concentration was they wanted her to have a private funeral and not have anything, grandeur. But aside from the movie about the lack of response from the royal family over the wake of this tragic event, it also focuses on the then newly elected Prime Minister Tony Blair, who claims that he will lead the Labour Party into a new direction while trying to save the monarchy's reputation by encouraging the Queen to acknowledge that even though Princess Diana was divorced from Prince Charles, she should still be considered family, being that she raised their sons who could potentially be the next rulers of Great Britain if the monarchy is still in existence after Queen Elizabeth II's death. Yes, we all know that, even though Queen Elizabeth II has been a queen for a long, long time, Just to remind you, she's 95 years old. She probably doesn't have that much long left. Maybe she could make 100. Who knows? I don't know if there was any monarchies who were centurions. But it would be kind of interesting to know if she will make it there. Who knows? She could. Maybe, you never know. But of course, before William could ever take over the position as king, well, of course, we all know that Charles is the actual next in line as being king. But I never know. If anything should happen to Prince Charles, like if he should go before Queen Elizabeth II, it could happen. Children can also go before their parents. I've had a few relatives who died before their parents were born. Who died before their parents. Stupid me. Why did I say that? Sometimes I wonder to myself why I get so tongue-tied. Anyhow, yeah, I've seen children die before their parents do. And then William could become king. But until then, he has to get through Papa Chucky before he takes over. That is if the monarchy is still in existence. I mean, you never know. Maybe after Queen Elizabeth II's death, there probably will be no more monarchy. I mean, what kind of significance does the monarchy have really anyway? I mean, who knows? Maybe Great Britain could eventually split up and become independent countries, and they won't have to depend on the monarchy anymore. And the monarchy could be overthrown. It could happen. France is not run by a monarchy anymore. Neither are countries like Hungary, Italy, and Romania. They're not ruled under monarchy anymore. So you never know what could happen. The possibilities are all very, very endless. But in this movie, newly elected Prime Minister Tony Blair is trying to do everything in his power to save the royal family's reputation by agreeing that Princess Diana, who was looked up to and admired by the people, should still be regarded as family. After all, she has raised two boys into the royal family. Yeah, okay, I understand what you're meaning. In today's standards, Prince Harry does not want to be considered royal. But, hey, we still have William. And he looks like he wants to become king if ever he should get the position. But, when it comes down to it, the royal family was not given, great responses, especially from news outlets, tabloids. I mean, they were all ripping them to shreds, saying that they were nothing but just a bunch of cold, heartless, emotionless bastards. I mean, maybe that's not exactly their words, but I'm not really exaggerating that much. Am I? Of course not. But they did rip them to shreds. And they had brought up a lot of nasty scandals. That sometimes makes me often wonder, how are these magazines still existing? And how do we know whether what they're reporting on is accurate or complete bullshit? And how do they know what is being said and what is being talked about behind closed doors? Now, although this movie was inspired by an actual tragic event that happened in 1997, it still could be considered a work of fiction because we don't know what's going on behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle or whatever headquarters the Queen is in. We don't have a fucking clue. So therefore, our guess is as good as theirs. Now, we're not here to try to make assumptions, but we're also not here to demonize, ostracize, or criticize, or any kinds of ISIS towards the royal family. We're looking into a non-biased account of what was going on, what was being said behind the closed doors, and the only thing we could do is assume. So therefore, all of this might be a work of non-fiction, being considered that this was based on a true story. We don't really know what's happening behind closed doors, which makes this movie part fiction as well. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I personally think it's a good thing. I think that there was a great serviceable job being done here, and I owe it a lot to the great direction from Stephen Frears and the wonderful script by Peter Morgan. So in the opening scenes, we see the newly elected Prime Minister Tony Blair, played by Michael Sheen, dominate in the elections. He gets offered a congratulations from the Queen, though with very little enthusiasm. Now, of course, a lot of people think she's just a stoic, upper-class snob who practically wears a crown, fancy jewelry, and dresses, and is always perched upon her throne. And when she's out in the public, she does that little wave like. But I think that this movie actually gives a clear picture that there's more to her than what is being passed down to us to look like we know they know her more than she even knows herself. And yeah, the Queen did actually say that, you might be the newly elected Prime Minister, but I want to let you know, in my position, I have outlived 9 others before you. Which is probably very believable because I probably would expect her to say something like this. Which actually makes Helen Mirren's performance all the more accurate. She reveals that she had 9 prime ministers during her reign, starting with Winston Churchill. It's a sign that her character within the public eye shows that prime ministers come and go, but her reign is going to live on till she finally meets her maker. She is going to die on the throne. Whereas prime ministers, they have to go through the processes of being elected, and their time is usually very limited. So even though she likes to position herself as superior, which she is, I mean, after all, she is the queen, and but the thing is her position is more of an inheritance. Whereas, of course, a prime minister, you have to go through all the procedures, the elections, the campaigns, and the actual full proof that you can actually run a country. Whereas the Queen doesn't have to do any of that. All she has to do is just be born into it. That's all. Nothing more. But at least this movie, we get to actually see some dimension to her, and even a few unexpected surprises that even I was taken aback for. She's not one-dimensional. That's one thing for sure. They did very well. They did not make her one-dimensional. With Blair's agenda starting to take shape, probably trying to sort of make sure that Britain sort of breaks away from the Thatcherian rules and the other conservative leaders. Now we have a Labour Party leader in Tony Blair. So his agenda is starting to take shape. And just as he's about to embark on what he plans to do to make England or Great Britain a better country, something very tragic happens. On August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana, along with her new boyfriend, Dodi Fayed, were killed in a road accident in France while trying to escape a mob of paparazzi who have been hounding her since the early 80s. Now, of course, people are going to play the blame game on the paparazzi. And if unless you're living under a stone and you don't know who the paparazzi are, well, I'll tell you. They are a group of news hounds and journalists who just want to get the latest stories about her, the latest gossip, so that they could put it in their papers and they could either tell complete accuracy in what they're writing or just hyperbolic bullshit. Just to either make her look good or to make her look bad, or to make others around her look good or bad. But of course, if you just only think for 1 second that it was just the paparazzi alone that was the catalyst for her tragic death, I suggest some people should need to just look and read even further. Because what I've also read was that her limo driver, Henri Paul, actually they actually saw the autopsy of him, and it was revealed that the limo driver, Mr. Henri Paul, actually was intoxicated. He had high levels of alcoholic consumption in him. So he also was very tipsy, which also means that he was also very, very careless. I mean, those people who think that it was just the paparazzi was the only catalyst as to lead to Princess Diana's death, you'll probably just say that it was Yoko Ono herself who broke up the Beatles, when yet she was only just a small, tiny little fraction as to what led to the Beatles' breakup. The paparazzi, they're the Yoko Onos. Sure, they had some part to blame. But if you also look at the autopsy of Henri Paul, you'll notice that there was also high levels of alcohol in his system. And it was through his carelessness that he, Princess Diana, and Dodi Fayed were killed. The world was in shock and mourning through the coming weeks. I mean, there was like a whole big mountain full of flowers placed at Buckingham Palace. I mean, it was almost like an avalanche, and mourners were all over. Some were very, very saddened by her death, but were also very, very vicious in their verbal attacks on the royal family for not responding very well. And I could probably explain to you why the royal family did not show very, very much in terms of emotions. If you may all recall, Queen Elizabeth was coronated as Queen in 1952. That's a long time, folks. Even in 1997 and 2006 standards, that's still a long, long time. Now, if you really want to go to deep scrutiny, I'll be more than happy to explain to you. Queen Elizabeth came from an old school monarch tradition of the whole stiff upper lip approach towards the people, the commoners, the plebeians. Maybe even to some extent, the insignificants. She was raised with this whole stiff upper lip personification, and it just kind of stuck to her. But of course, if you go back to even the 90s, we notice that people love a good reaction. They would have not minded seeing maybe a little tear coming down the Queen's eyes. Maybe a little bit of hidden sadness. I mean, you could still have a sad look on your face and people will buy into you that you really do care. But when the Queen goes out in public, she's very stoic, very expressionless, and it's not because she wants to be that way, it was how she was raised. She was raised with that form. So in her years as a member of the royal family, we also understand that her and Prince Charles, their relationship was quite toxic at the time. And we all know that there was actually trouble since the day they've really ever married. I mean, even though Prince Charles was married to her, he was still somewhat smitten by Camilla Parker Boyles, whom Princess Diana did not like very much. And she actually made it quite obvious her hatred towards Camilla Parker Boyles. But Prince Charles had always considered Camilla his soulmate. Now, like I said, Princess Diana stuck around because, she had a family. She had a couple of sons to raise. But it was quite obvious that her time as a member of the royal family was not pleasant. She was scorned by the many members of the royal family and the monarchy as a whole, especially Queen Elizabeth II. It's quite obvious that Princess Diana and Queen Elizabeth II were really not, strong in the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law dynamics. Though Her Majesty often still took quite a liking of her two grandsons, Prince William and Harry, and would go out of her way to nurture them from backlash from the media. She was their safeguard, maybe still is, even though they're all adults and have kids of their own. Queen Elizabeth really only wanted to keep Diane on was due to, William and Harry being her grandchildren. The Queen was though devastated that a young lady like hers was taken so suddenly. Remember, she was only 37 years old. She felt that their funeral was going to be a private one due to no longer a royal family member since her divorce from Prince Charles. This cold reaction, however, did not sit very well with the general public, and eventually finger pointing from the mob started to materialize, which further tarnished the reputation of the royal family. Because they all want a response. By the time you get to the 80s and 90s to the present day, everybody wants a response. They felt very cold, very distant, and showed really like a lack to almost no response to her death, almost taking it like, well, she's not a royal anymore. Why should it be on our hands? But of course, we got Michael Sheen's Tony Blair, who is trying to persuade and convince the Queen Elizabeth II that Princess Diana deserves a high prolific funeral. The ever-determined and inexperienced opportunist, Tony Blair takes it upon himself to speak out to the public about the matter in hopes that Princess Diana gets a royal funeral and hopes to persuade Her Majesty the Queen to actually speak on behalf of her daughter in law's death. I mean, this might be partially because she was arbitrarily enthusiastic in doing so, or she's doing it because she was forced in and trying to just save reputation. Maybe we could see her doing it a little bit of both. When it comes to like having a big grand funeral, His Majesty Prince Charles, played by Alex Jennings, seems to take Mr. Blair's side while trying to keep a distance from his superior matriarch. Obviously, we could tell that Prince Charles in this movie, we could clearly tell that Prince Charles is like caught in a precarious situation. Now, a lot of times we do give him a lot of negative slack towards him, being the fact that he was never in love with Princess Diana and that he always had the hots for Camilla Parker Bowles. Still, however, after all, she is the mother of his two sons, and we could clearly tell that he wants what's best for her, not just for the sake of her sons, but what's best for her, the public, and what's best for the monarchy. And he also feels that she herself deserves it because she was looked upon and had this admiration from everyone across the globe. What they didn't know is that even though she was emancipated herself in the royal family, she was still loved and adored by the public, and not just for her pretty face or her trendy fashion, but her generous contributions to many organizations that support goodwill towards humanity. You don't see too many people doing that. I mean, the world we live in, we're all a bunch of selfish assholes. Well, okay, maybe not everyone is a selfish asshole. I mean, maybe I could be also a selfish asshole if given the chance to. They're also unaware that the general public can become quite vindictive and nasty and will likely spew negativity to the monarchs in any way possible, making them off as almost like demonic when they really aren't demonic in any way, shape, or form. They're all a very sensitive group of people, but they just have to conceal their emotions because of this whole framework of stiff upper lip. That's the way I see it. It's just heartbreaking that people actually go to these great lengths just to make themselves noticed. When it comes to performances, Helen Mirren was absolutely amazing in her performance. Her role as Queen Elizabeth II was not just for the sake of costume dressing to look the part, but to actually be the character in all of her quirkiness and everything, and it was displayed towards absolute perfection. It's like you see her performance as Queen Elizabeth II, you would think that it's really her. Her mannerisms, her physicality, it's all just magically like right there in place. And never once does it feel like it's been played for mimicry or satire, but pure sincerity throughout it all. It's no wonder that Helen Mirren won the Oscar for her performance because she truly deserved it. Now, just because Helen Mirren won for playing the Queen this was not the Helen Mirren as Queen Elizabeth II show, because the supporting cast also seemed to tune in some very, very well defined performances as well. If there was anybody who probably should have deserved a Best Actor in a supporting role, I would have went for Michael Sheen. He was outstanding in his role as Prime Minister Tony Blair. Not only does he look the part physically, but he also has the mannerisms very well down put. Like Helen Mirren, Sheen adds dimension to Blair's character, giving him a softer edge, making us believe that he's more than just a tough politician with a one-track mind. We do get to delve a lot about him, though maybe some more of his own personal family life could have been measured up. But since this movie is called The Queen, and it is mostly focusing on, like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, at least, I mean, we can kind of understand why Sheen's character was at times a bit underdeveloped. But then again, this was not about Tony Blair, it was about Queen Elizabeth II. But still, Michael Sheen does a very, very fine, good job. And we will leave it at that. The other supporting cast do a very significant part in their respective roles. American actor James Cromwell was exceptionally wonderful as the Queen's husband, Prince Philip. Also, Sylvia Syms does a nice take on Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Alex Jennings brings some compassion and sympathy to a very vulnerable Prince Charles. He's not on a lot, but we do kind of feel his grief and feel his sadness. Helen McCrory shines brightly as the anti-monarchy of Tony Blair, Cherry Blair. She, of course, has this kind of like narrow-minded perspective like all the other members of the public spectrum have done over the years by demonizing and ostracizing the royal family. And that Cherry Blair also has those same similar sentiments, which can be both understandable, but also most of the time quite ignorant. And Roger Allam is wonderful as the Queen's personal assistant, Robin Janvrin. Written by Peter Morgan, the script is at the most standard and flawless. If anything, it could have easily been panned out as a TV miniseries in terms of its vibes. Sure, it could have been. I mean, maybe it would have been more cheaper to make a TV miniseries. But instead, they decided to the hell with the low key stuff and do something grandeur. Since this movie was more about Princess Diana's death and awakening than the royal families, then I'd say go for it. Make it into a movie. And they did. They gambled, they succeeded, and Helen Mirren won an Oscar. Now, if it were casted by low-tier performers, this movie would have been flat. Fortunately, the Queen is depicted as her strayed from her royalty and looked upon as a human being caught in the middle of doing what is right for the royal family and doing what the people felt Princess Diana rightfully deserved. Even the everyday life, she hasn't got all the golden net crowns and fancy jewelry. In fact, even through her advanced age, she was still a very, very independent-minded individual who was also capable of doing things of her own without the confines of servants, butlers, or personal vehicle as type of individuals. She could do a lot of things on her own. For one thing, she's also been known for wearing casual clothing. She also can ride in cars without a chauffeur. And, another fact is, even though she wears most of the time, you see her wearing fancy jewelries and expensive gowns and many vivid and colorful hats, and carries a scepter and waves to the crowd. Still, you have to admit that she is an everyday person. She is a human being just like you and I are. And she also gets involved in many other sorts of human like fun. She also seems to, like I said, she could drive on her own. She can be seen wearing casual clothing if she wanted to. And she was also adept at mechanics. She is a certified auto mechanic. People didn't notice that. I mean, before she became a queen, she actually took trainers courses in mechanics. So to say that she's just some fortunate soul, she isn't. But because of her status and upbringing, she doesn't know how to open up to them. I mean, she knows that, over the decades, the times have changed. And the 1990s, people are not too fond or acceptance of the royal family because of the fact that they're just emotionless, which they shouldn't, but they are. And sure, it's easily to dismiss the royal family as evil leeches and point fingers at their flaws. Morgan makes us see the royals in a different light without fully sugarcoating them, but at the same time not completely demonizing them. We see their strengths and weaknesses, their strengths and their vulnerabilities, but in the end, they were still members of the human race, and they do live their lives like everybody else. They are not insignificant, but at the same time, you know, they are not too, one dimensional. They have regular lives. They do everyday stuff that you and I and everyone else can do. So, with all that further said and done, I would like to give a big thanks to director Stephen Frears, who created an atmosphere that had the world back in tears in 1997. The cinematography and the editing was really picturesque and was handled with care respectively. But the best part was the idea to let Helen Mirren breathe life into Her Majesty and making her more human and less like a public figure. The editing is outstanding, where it gives old news footage and archived newspaper sources to make it feel real. Especially with when Princess Diana died, and many celebrities from all over the world had came, including many Hollywood actors like Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise, and directors like Steven Spielberg, amongst many others. And then, of course, you had the musicians that were there too, like Elton John, who was doing a different take of an old song that he did back in the late 70s, early 80s called Candle in the Wind, which he changed the lyrics around a bit, but did it in response to Princess Diana's death. So, just by that alone, we actually feel a sense of realism there. But like I said, it's not 100% real. What's happening behind closed doors is probably just a work of fiction or just a general assumption. That's all we can do, unfortunately. Although, like I said, this is not confirmed about what is happening behind closed doors. The movie gives us a proper image of what is taking place and wants us to believe that these monarchies are much more human than what the media feeds us. They're not a bunch of evil leeches. They're not all a bunch of stiff upper lip people. They are humans like everyone else. It was definitely a triumphant film and a well-deserved Oscar win for Dame Helen Mirren. And for that, I give The Queen, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I will have to give The Queen a 9. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.